Good afternoon, evening. It is it is not Monday, July the 29th. I flipped my calendar one day. It is actually Tuesday, July the 30th. And welcome to Realities in Criminal Justice. And this is week 5, everybody. What that means is next week is it. The final lecture will be next Tuesday, and I told you that the quarter was going to go pretty fast, and it is going pretty fast. I'm going to talk about a few things, but at the top, I'm going to just talk about something to say, shout out to some of you guys in this class. I won't say your names because I don't have the thing in front of me. I have it in my folder. A few of you, I thought I was going to get a chance to see. As you know, I'm in Illinois in Romeoville, but this past week, from Friday the 26th up until yesterday, I was in Florida. I was in Orlando, and those of you who are my Facebook friends know that my wife and I were celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary, which was yesterday. No, not yesterday. Now, day before yesterday, which was the Sunday, the 28th. And I took a little detour to surprise one of my students who I mentor, and he lives in Tampa, and he graduated during the graduation Saturday at Newport Richey. Which I think included Newport Richey, Tampa Braden, and I forget which other one it was. It was 3 campuses. Or it might have been Ocala. But at any rate, I saw several of your names on the program as graduates from associates. And I said, oh, yeah, those students were my former students. And I saw a few of you that are actually in my class right now in this Realities Criminal Justice. And I kept looking to see if I'd see any of you, but only not one of you I don't think was there actually. There's a lot of criminal justice students. I don't know why guys don't march. They get criminal justice degrees. I think that it's an awesome thing to march because you work hard to get there. But at any rate, I missed one of my former students. She did find out I was there because she's my friend on Facebook, and she saw me congratulating the person, and she posted on Facebook. But there was one student, and I won't say his name, but he knows who I'm talking about, who I've communicated with quite a bit on the phone. From down in Florida, who overcame an obstacle of losing his dad, but anyway, look forward to seeing you guys do well. So anyway, just wanted to congratulate those of you who did receive your associates there, and I didn't get a chance to meet you because the student that did meet me, his name was Sean Thurman. Those of you who are on Facebook with me, he was in my constitutional law class in this bachelor program, and he's currently in the bachelor program in another class, other classes, but he's not in this class. So congratulate you guys for that accomplishment, and sure you'll go even further. Had a good time down there. Hadn't been down to Florida in over 20-something years, so really hot and humid. And we had a storm down there when we got ready to leave on Monday, yesterday, that shut down the international airport. So we ended up leaving out late. So anyway, just wanted to say that at the outset. Okay, so let's get right into sharing my screen here. And here I am right here. And all this information. So I skip all the way down to remind you that your rubrics, I keep saying over and over, pay attention to your rubrics. Some of you don't I can tell because of the fact that you keep forgetting to put citations in the body and references at the end, and you lose 10 points. So not too many of you are caught with the situation of Grammarly, but a few of you have been hit with Grammarly checks because you have to run your papers through Grammarly, which I encourage all the time. So but pay a close attention to your rubrics, and I will talk in a few minutes about the assignment, the project, which is already in week 4 assignment. I will talk about a little bit about that because I'm going to be grading that this week before Sunday. So so week 5 lecture will be posted down here, and you can see that is it. And then next Tuesday will be the end of the lecture situation here. Let's go down to course calendar. And you can see this is where we are right here. Your reading assignment was due yesterday. Your initial post tonight, media coverage of Trayvon Martin case. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And I thought about that when I was in Florida. That in the Casey Anthony case, which also took place in your state of Florida, those of you who are down there. Then your reply post is due Saturday the 3rd. And then your written assignment is due on the 4th, as well as your course project. So, and that's your draft, and I'm going to just comment about that. I kind of made some comments to you when I graded your week, your previous on week 3. When I did the week 3 grading, I commented about it. And then, you know, we'll have the final lecture, and next week, same time, and then you'll see that will be on the 6th, a week from today. And then your grades, the course ends on the 11th, which is the 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. All right. So we'll talk about those assignments on next week. So now let's go to the back to the course home. Let's look at the announcement. Week 5 announcement, as you can see. The right to know. The right to know. It's interesting. It makes me think of my radio show, which was called Know Your Rights. But rights was spelled with a W, as you may have heard. I've told you before. So anyway, you're going to look at the Trayvon Martin trial. You're going to look at the media, the jury, and the high-profile defendant, a defense perspective on the media circus. And then you're going to complete the activity, media and active investigations. Then your discussion assignment is media coverage of the Trayvon Martin case. And then the complete written assignment, impartial trials and course projects for your final paper. And so impartial trials, and then you're going to course project final paper. All right. So you want to get that in, get that ready for me. So let's go straight to, let's close this down, course tools. Let's go to the module itself, week 5, and let's look at the assignments that we have here. So impartial trials, read the article, Trial by the Media, Betrayal of the First Amendment's Purpose, and then in an article, read the article, and then in a 1 to 2 page paper, address these following issues. Make sure that you have citations in the body and references at the end. Very, 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 very important. And then your discussion assignment, after reviewing the Trayvon Martin trial, which it tells you how to reach it in the other section, you're going to deal with these issues. And then your rough draft. So now, oh no, you did your rough draft last week, correction. So now you're going to do your final. Now, I'm going to try to have your papers graded as soon as I possibly can, so that I can make sure that I give you some comments so that you can have in your final paper. But make sure you satisfy this. It's going to be 5 to 7 pages. Did you hear me? Not counting the cover page, double space, not single space. Supported by the interviews you conducted from the 2 sources, the PIO as well as the news source. And then it's in paragraph form. Do not list the questions and answers in bullet form. Include a minimum of 3 in-text citations of persons you are interviewing. A minimum, okay? No reference page is needed. You hear me? Did you hear me? You do not have to do a reference page for this paper unless you use outside sources, which you should. So if you use outside sources, articles, books, publications, I'm not talking about things in the module itself, research that relate to it, which I encourage, make sure you do include that on the reference page. Make sure you get that clear. And be sure to provide an explanation of your results, and then APA format is required. So here is the rubric, as you are familiar with. Let's go to that. Minimum of 3 in-text citations and quotes from the interviewee, and paper contains explanation of the results. Now, you're going to also provide details concerning the questions themselves as well. And paragraph form, 5 to 7 pages minimum. You'll lose 10 points or you'll lose quite a few points if you don't have that. And then you want to make sure that you have your APA involved. Remember, I encourage the use of outside sources, so there should be references. And as I always say, if you have 3 references, you should have your citations included in the body of the paper that relate to those references as well. And that's what I'm going to say about that. And then pay attention to my comments that I put in your rough draft that I'll be grading this week, that is actually due by Friday, okay? And then, let's go back for a minute. And impartial trials, 100 points. You look, here's the rubric for that. And you get 20 points if you do this, because the Sixth Amendment is critical. And then the paper identifies whether or not media information given to juniors determining outcome of the case. You discuss that issue in there. Paragraph form, people, not one long paragraph. And then a list of a minimum 3 issues relating to the general public knowing about the details, suspects, witnesses, so forth, prior to the trial. And then, can they remain biased? Why or why not as well? And then here's the usual stuff that we have, citations and references required. Again, I stress reading my comments on your rubrics, because I always put comments on your rubric grade. You don't see it when you look at the rubric itself, but if you were to look at your grade book, in the grade book, you would see at the end of this portion, you'd see a section for comments, and that's where you'd see the information that I put in there relating to that. And that's the assignments for week 5. All right. So now let's go back to dealing with let's go to week 5 and go to, yes, okay, the lesson content. So under the lesson content, that's where, and you want to make sure you check on about the Trayvon Martin trial. Make sure that you get the information about the Trayvon Martin trial. And here are your assignments again. Media and active investigations. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Impartial trials, media coverage of the Trayvon Martin case, and then your final paper. Then, of course, your live lecture, given what you need to get your points for that on time. So anyway, as you already know, we've been discussing some of these issues, the right to know versus the right to a fair trial. And you should be aware of the fact that I've been saying from the beginning, as I already kind of commented to you guys when we were dealing with the O.J. Simpson case, because I actually covered it. And, you know, here's what some people got to remember. The media coverage of the O.J. Simpson case shouldn't count as media coverage because the case was on TV, that the trial itself was on TV. They call it the trial of the century. And some people forget that and use that, but you have to remember that by the time that happened, the media had done its thing in reporting information, and as you discovered, I've discovered many you said when the media had impact on it. I think the media had impact when broadcasting the case and also with the reporting, with the country at large reaching conclusions about the case, but those people who generally were involved with reaching those conclusions did not end up on the jury and were not the ones who actually had the opportunity to make the decision about the innocence or guilt of O.J. Simpson. As I shared with you, I had some inside information from lead attorney Johnny Cochran myself that I learned years later when I met him. He came to Chicago sometime after that case and partnered with one of the lawyers that I know well, Jim Montgomery, here before he passed. And if you also read his book that he wrote. But Johnny Cochran kind of gave me tips about that trial, and I kind of discussed with him what I thought, and he agreed with me 100% that the prosecution handed the case to them on a silver platter by the way that the law enforcement individuals conducted their investigation, or how they, should I say, botched up the investigation of the O.J. Simpson case, from the DNA, from the evidence of the shoes, from not specifically drawing attention to the glove itself, but it was a circumstantial evidence case, clearly a circumstantial evidence case. And some people said, well, O.J. didn't testify. That is a common practice of defense attorneys, and I, as a defense attorney, commonly did not put a person on the trial. And there are a number of reasons why I understand that you don't put a person on the stand, because of the fact that either they have a background, which O.J. did not have, or either they have a tendency to have what we call diarrhea of the mouth. They'll just talk and talk away the case. Some have accused O.J. Simpson of being an arrogant individual, and they didn't want that kind of thing to come across to the jury. And so anyway, remember, the public and the media formulated their positions. But again, the key thing in this case and the result was the fact that the jury decided based on the evidence there. Even though there were some issues that I pointed out regarding race with the jury, because the jury was primarily African American, and the result was he was found not guilty of the murders of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson. However, in the civil trial, which dealt with the lower standard, not beyond a reasonable doubt for the criminal case, but preponderance of the evidence in the civil case, then financially OJ got hit in the pocket with that, with a reverse, primarily white jury. So I don't, I don't say much, but I should say this, is that in reality, recognizing that people are people, then people are going to bring some of their biases into the case. And even if they didn't know about the case itself, jurors themselves are humans, and they're going to bring in their personal biases, but it's still the best system that we have. So anyway, we come now to the point here, and I said this before, that the public, as it opens up here, has the right to know certain information about the case, what information that the investigation provides. And it's balanced off with the First Amendment right of that person and the constitutional right of an accused to have the right to a fair trial. And so the media has the responsibility of reporting current events and affairs to the public, and so it's a balance between that. But as it says, citizens of the United States have a right to a fair and unbiased jury trial by our peers. And the question is, did the media affect that in a case? And usually that comes about in high-profile cases. But there are many things that happen. I think I mentioned to you the other day that when jurors are selected to come on a trial, jurors are selected from a combination of ways in our jurisdictions through the voter rolls, those who are registered voters, and they will at random send out, first of all, some just send out jury summons ordering you to appear. And then in Will County, where I am in Illinois, they send out a questionnaire. And that's not a summons. But the point of the matter is that here's what happened here with me. I got one the other day. I filled it out online. I submitted my information and details. I let them know about myself. I let them know what I do now. I let them know what I've done in my past, with defense attorney, dealing with prosecution, dealing with being a police officer, investigator, and paralegal. And I let them know those things. I let them know also about the personal things that affect me, such as the murdering of my parents, which many of you know about. All of you should know about it because I talked about it during open house. And so when they got all that information together, they told me to check back within a week, and I did, and I checked back, and I just looked at it the other day, and it says you're disqualified from or serving on jury duty at this time. And I figured that was going to be the case. I wasn't surprised that it happened. I will say this as an aside. My oldest daughter, some years ago in Cook County, was selected on a jury, and it was a criminal case, and I was surprised she even got selected. And with all her background of saying what her dad did and all the different things that she disclosed to them about what happened with her grandmother, who was my parents, she was still selected. But guess who the foreperson of the jury selected was? It was her. And so she literally hung the jury. She would not vote guilty. There were 11 that said guilty, and she kept doing it, and they came in with a hung jury. And then they retried him with another jury, and guess what the results were? He was found not guilty, so my daughter said she was right. So the system worked. The system works. So what I'm trying to say is sometimes people who don't have an understanding or haven't worked in it might be biased, or either they might come from one perspective, which is biasness, but don't take into consideration the other aspects of it. I've been active in the media for many years, having done radio and television, still doing radio right now. I am a commentator on issues that happen currently, and I will say things about cases such as the Trayvon Martin case. You heard me talk about that, and I also covered the Jesse Smollett case with a very detailed, I think it was an hour and some minute Facebook Live commentary based on the information and evidence that was presented to me. I actually had the police report itself and used that in it. So, and the media were the ones who got it, and the way they got it was through a FOIA, F-O-I-A, Freedom of Information Act request, and utilized that. So now, with the context of that, I'm in favor of the media reporting the information, but I'm also in favor of individuals having a fair trial and making sure that individuals are tried fairly by the trier of fact, whether it's the judge. Now, it's very difficult with judges a lot of times being involved with a case, especially in situations where most judges, as in our jurisdictions, are elected and not selected for life unless they're in the federal system. Federal system, the judges are selected for life in the Supreme Court, the appellate court for long periods of time, as well as the district court, which is the trial court. So what I was going to say is that some of the state judges make decisions based on keeping their jobs. For example, in the Trayvon Martin case, though one of the police officers, Jason Van Dyke, was found guilty of second-degree murder by the jury and 16 counts of aggravated battery with a firearm, the judge did an end around and used the system to give him a shorter sentence. Then a day before that, there was a bench trial, again, where a judge found the police officers who submitted their reports found them not guilty of colluding with their reports, even though the reports were totally contradictory of the evidence, primarily the evidence that was produced not by the public, but was released to the public that came from the dash cam of the Chicago Police Department. And so the end result, what happened is that the Citizens Board, which oversees police, and the Fraternal Order of Police Union organization hates the citizen involvement, which is ridiculous because they don't think that people should have anything to say about that. They think that we should operate with the internal affairs investigation aspects of it, which, quite honestly, it didn't work well. I know about it. I was actually an internal affairs investigator for a town, I told you. But on the large scale, it was the police department who investigated the police department, and you know that already. That's like an apparent conflict of interest. So anyway, the bottom line was the Civilian Review Board decided to terminate those officers, and all 4 of those officers lost their jobs. So anyway, just saying that, again, dealing with the fair trial and the media aspects of it here. So now let's get into the media influence itself. And so individuals are entitled to due process, which means that the individual has a presumption of innocence until guilty. Now, that's a presumption that's given. Unfortunately, in the minds of many people, it's the reverse. They don't say it. They, oh, yeah, innocent until proven guilty. But their mind tells them something else, which is the reverse, guilty until proven innocent. And so I tell people that, well, the fact of the matter is that there needs to be someone who is a watchdog for the public to be able to let the public know what is going on. as an example here, reporters like Nancy Grace, you all should all be familiar with her. She's an investigative reporter, and she does a really bang-up job. And she provides information from the media perspective by looking at the evidence and the information that's handed out to her. By the way, the sources that we deal with in terms of the media getting their information is the PIO. That is who provides the information to them. Generally, the officers themselves are not allowed to speak about an investigation, so it's the PIO that's involved. And they release it to the news media, and the news media takes the information, and in most cases, did you hear me say in most cases, are responsible and share the information based upon the details that are given. But the question is, do people like Nancy Grace style of media violate the First Amendment, violate the due process right of the individuals? Well, there's debate, and those who are on both sides who will state their position about how much this does. But let me say from a personal perspective again, and as a professional individual having worked in the system in the various aspects that I have, I see the media as being appreciated by the information that they're able to provide to the public. And the public then is able to make their judgment based upon the information that the media provides, because many trials that are tried, and remember I said this, that less than 10% of trials go to, of criminal charges go to trial. Most of them are played out in pretrial conference with plea bargaining. But we're talking about the less than 10% that do go to trial, and also those that are what we call media worthy, where the public is kept abreast about what's going on in the case. And I have quite honestly found in most cases, and I said this before, that with the exception of a few, I think like the Casey Anthony case, the media kind of trounced on it. The Shepard case, which I commented about early on in the course, was so rampant that the individual wasn't protected very well. And so the Supreme Court granted a new trial and talked about certain things that the media did. And now to provide protection for many cases, the judges have the power to issue what we call gag orders, where not just the media doesn't get the information, but they can't stop the media from reporting information. But what they can do is encourage the parties, all the parties, from the attorneys and everybody involved in the actual system, to not make comments about the case to the public, to the media, during the course of a trial. So that's an attempt to balance off and protect the due process rights of the individuals. So as you should be aware, and it says here correctly, people are often attracted to wrongdoings and challenges in our system, and this helps to drive the power of the influence of the public media, of the perception. So the perception of the media itself. And so we are accustomed to the right to know aspect of it. And we are in a country where it is important that we are informed. As you know, the impeachment hearings, if they take place, the Nixon impeachment hearings were all on television. If you're old enough to remember the Watergate hearings, they were all on. If you remember the Clarence Thomas confirmation, it was in the media quite a bit. Now, these are not trials. I'm just trying to show you how the right to know of individuals. The most recent one was the judge that was the last judge that was appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that whole scenario that was on nationwide TV. But remember, in the end, the people who had to make the vote, put the votes in, were the Senate and the House, but the Senate primarily in these scenarios. So sometimes it says the media can manipulate and lead the public into making assumptions about a person's guilt or innocence before they've actually been convicted. Yes, but what we try to do is filter those individuals out of the becoming triers of fact by using what we call voir dire, which or either we started off with like the questionnaire. They felt in terms of me being selected as a juror based on my questionnaire that I submitted to them. They didn't ask me if I could be fair and impartial. They just said, tell me about myself. They were afraid of having a person like me to get into a room like that who could possibly influence the jury, as my daughter was allowed to get in there and affect it. And so it's very interesting when you find out there are certain kinds of people that when we were doing courses and seminars as attorneys to determine what's a good juror, and the key thing that we wanted as a good juror is somebody who we believe would take our side. That's the bottom line on it. However, we also had to be aware of the fact that because they had peremptory challenges that the lawyers themselves could use to remove someone from being a juror for giving no reason at all, except they should not use it to eliminate a person on the basis of race. Not by saying that, but the result of it. But anyway, the point of the matter is that the system with the questionnaire that we're given as lawyers to look at, as well as the questions that we can ask them off of that, or during voir dire or jury selection, we seek to get individuals who can be as neutral as possible. I was always taught by most well-known criminal defense attorneys that I was trained by, R. Eugene Pencham, James Montgomery, and some others who have gone on years ago and passed away. But I had the opportunity coming up, even while I was in college, to be exposed to watching and listening and hearing them and sitting in the courtrooms and learning how the system operated. But one of the things that they always taught me is 12 in the box, it's called. And the reason why it's called 12 is because generally it's 14 because you have two alternates. But the 14 is that when the trial is reached the stage and it's going to be deliberation of the jury and the judge gives instructions, they excuse the other two alternate jurors. But they have heard the whole thing, and that happened in all the cases that I know of. And you know that happened in the O.J. Simpson case because there were a few people who were removed because of things. And sometimes people lie. I mean, that just goes with the territory. And I guess that's why we have criminals. And as a result, and people have bones to pick. But what they do is that they look at certain types of people. They don't want, I don't know, I let them know I was a pastor and a minister. Sometimes people don't want people like that on. The defense would love to have them. The prosecution does not like to have them because they feel like, you know, you'll go easy on them and that kind of thing, and that you're going to push that off on you. Remember, people, we are not robots, and so we are going to be bringing into our decision-making, including in trials, without media input, the biases that we have inbred in us based upon our experiences in life. So anyway, it says in that final part about the media influence, our society has adapted to being informed by the media. We are a nation that has given into media attention and allow the media to keep us informed, and we watch. And as I already said before, that when there are high-profile cases, the commercials are like the Super Bowl commercials. They run the top. People want this big money that the networks make. It's not like CNN, where there's no, they don't do it. Not CNN, like C-SPAN rather. But even with most of these TV, even court TV, they have commercial breaks, and sponsors want to advertise because they know they have a captive audience there, and they will pay big money. So it's not the media that makes the money, but it keeps the media employed and so forth. Yet sometimes the media can manipulate and lead the public into assumptions before trial, as I said earlier. But again, how are you going to eradicate that? It's just like when in the cases there is a person, there is some evidence that comes out from the stand, and then one of us will jump up, whether it's defense or prosecution attorney, and object, and the judge will sustain our objections, and then the judge will make a statement with sustain, which means they'll honor our objection, and then they'll make a statement like, jury, disregard the statement that you just heard. Well, that's for the record. That's really what's done. But you and I both know that the people still are going to, when it gets into that room, they're going to make their decision based upon it, because they don't have to discuss the details of it, or they can discuss it, but after the fact, as you've seen jurors being interviewed after cases about how they made their decision, including the O.J. Simpson case and other cases that are involved. And so the media influence, like I said again, is not as much in most instances or cases that go to trial. Okay. So we conclude with how the media reporting affects investigation. Does media reporting truly affect investigations? Do they? The question is, the impact on law enforcement and criminal investigations can be positive or negative depending on what the media represents. I don't know, that point of contention there. Remember, you as law enforcement, criminal justice professionals, investigators, detectives, police officers, forensics people, and other individuals involved in criminal cases have to follow the protocol and processes that are in the system that you're trained to do. And that I don't think that the media coverage causes individuals not to do a good job with, for example, gathering DNA. In other words, criminal investigations are not affected adversely by those individuals in the media contaminating the location where an incident happens, because as those of you who took a class I taught some years ago may remember, that the system, they put the tape around, and it's not released to the public until the information that is necessary to have been received for the investigation is, and then the public is allowed to get to it. Now, some people may feel that that they need to keep it off forever. Well, unfortunately, that can't be in a lot of cases, because it involves public ways, and it also involves where people live that may not have anything to do with it. If something happens in an apartment building or something of that nature, or deprive a person from their home where they live doing those kinds of things, or there's a public building involved, and the public needs to have access to that building to do a lot of different things. So the key thing is asking the question, is the media really affecting the investigations? And it's argued. Consider a missing child. The media passes the information around, letting everybody know about the missing child. That's good. And actually, you know, and I know already that we have Amber Alerts now. And Amber Alerts deal with missing people, not just children, but millions of viewers help law enforcement on that to help locate the child, and sometimes the child is located. As you know, the whole milk carton thing where, you know, there are situations. And then there's some unresolved crimes in America. There's the case of two young girls from Chicago, the Bradley sisters, Tiana, and I can't think of the other one's name, who just suddenly disappeared, and 20 some odd years ago, and no one has found a trace of them. You've seen situations where kids have disappeared, and then there have been people come back and say they're that person. It turns out they're not that person. A young man did that recently. So the point of the matter is media can play an effective role in catching individuals and helping to apprehend criminals or those kinds of things. It says on the flip side, they can hurt investigations. And this article, Polygraph Keys versus Publicity, Serial Murder, Public Relations, provides some other insight, and you can take your time and go and look at that. I can tell you that I've been around a lot of cases here prior to becoming a lawyer. The John Wayne Gacy case, Richard Speck case, where Richard Speck murdered numerous, a bunch of nurses, but had one person who survived, an eyewitness and so forth, is that, you know, and then, you know, using the term polygraph, there are issues that I take with that has nothing to do with the media. But the question when they say polygraph keys is they're talking about those fingers that type out the information. Do they type out the truth, or do they stretch it for sensationalism? Well, to be honest with you, I think that in most cases, and I've said some, the Casey Anthony case is an example of where the media might have, you know, gone too far in terms of it. There's a question now about the R. Kelly case. The R. Kelly case that has been tried. He was tried by the, you know, media providing information in early on, and he was found not guilty. But now there's some new stuff, and now at the federal level, and the media is providing the information on the people's right to know about what's going on. And as you remember the documentary that I can't think of the name of it, but related to R. Kelly, that actually was the thing that opened up the investigations further to the current charges that R. Kelly is now facing. And so I can tell you that the key is going to be what happens in that courtroom. I can tell you this: there are going to be people who like R. Kelly on the jury, and there are going to be people who don't like R. Kelly on the jury. There are going to be people who will look at the evidence and say they're looking at the evidence, and will look at the evidence. Then there are people who are going to say they're looking at the evidence and remain unbiased and actually be biased. So again, it involves a number of factors of the human aspects of jurors. Okay, we don't use robots. Even then, there would be a human aspect. You should know that all robots or computers operate by programmers, and programmers are human beings. So again, data in, data out. So what's in there is going to come out. Additional insight into this can be found by looking at this article. So concluding with considering a good lead on a criminal offense that is active, I'm reading this, such as what we saw in the Watergate scandal, I talked about that, or a critical piece of evidence that the police are using to gain real hard evidence against the accused. If the media reveals information about an item like a shoe print, a weapon, unique caliber size used in the commission of a crime. The suspect can tamper with the evidence or damage the evidence beyond proof, avoiding police detection of evidence leading to the suspect. Says this, for this reason, the police remain cautious on releasing media information while the media continues to seek out the facts. So, as I said, the PIO has that. And so it's a relationship that remains one of necessity, but there's good and bad. And I already said that the last things that talked about in most criminal investigations, it's because either the law enforcement violated the rights of individuals, or either the evidence that's demonstrated creates some change in terms of how the case is viewed. And I said this before, that the two largest, greatest things that have changed criminal investigation that people should be aware of is, number one, the DNA evidence. When DNA came about, it can, I can defer this, and so that's, sorry about that. That's my computer from the college. They let me know they want to update it, but I have to do it afterwards. But anyway, and so DNA has worked both ways. But DNA is just like any other thing, as demonstrated not just in the OJ case, but in other cases, is that if those who gather the DNA gather it properly, or if the law enforcement individuals, forensic people, decide they want to doctor up the evidence, or they botch it up, or they don't take care of it, or the police do something crazy like what Van Natter did by the shoes, with the shoes, by taking the shoes and putting the shoes in the trunk of his car over the weekend, and rather than following the protection of the chain of custody, taking them to the lab where they could be preserved, and then chain of custody. He did a detour and took them in the trunk of his car for the weekend. And there are so many things that could happen there, but it questions that, and it creates techniques. And then when a juror hears that, or a trier of fact hears that, they begin to wonder, that police officer, were they operating following protocol, or could the evidence have been tampered with? Those kinds of things. So there's a whole lot of things here. So I hope that one of the things that you have really learned from this class, from me and my experience, and you'll learn that over the period that you become a professional, is that you've got to do things following those issues that those transferable skills. You have to be able to communicate on a professional level. You have to recognize you're dealing with diverse individuals. You have to recognize the fact that you're going to be professional and follow the processes that are given to you and taught to you, so that you can utilize them in a professional manner. And so I'm going to close by saying about the Trayvon Martin trial. I didn't see a lot of media coverage that like the OJ, but I did learn enough about it that the results, I think, of the trial were that George Zimmerman really got off the hook with the Trayvon Martin case, and that it came out to be true later, because you followed and saw what happened with him. He's been in the media several times for incidents that probably tied to the same kind of activity that took place when he was found not guilty of first-degree murder, and the results were that he got a slap on the wrist, that kind of thing. So anyway, and then the old argument that takes place again across the country on racial lines, and that's not just racial lines. Individuals who looked at what happened in that case felt that because it was a young black kid that in Florida, and this is the temperament that I get from a lot of people from Florida that I talk to, because I only been to Florida periodically as recently as the other day. Not there to talk about that, but the point of the matter is that recognizing that the media reported things, but there are things that happen and problematic. So you're dealing with that. So with that, I'm going to say good night to you, and I'm going to wish you the best this week. Again, if you have any concerns or questions, reach out to me. You know how to do that. My phrase for tonight is very simply this: Trayvon Martin. That's it. So I'm going to wish you all a good evening, and I will see you next week for our final lecture of the quarter. Good night.